All right, today is January 5th, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes CSI implementation group. This is the second meeting of the quarter. On our agenda, primary task is figuring out what we're going to be working on for Q1, assigning tasks to folks, and that's pretty much it. There's a couple other items on the agenda we can go through as well. Let me start by sharing my screen. So last time we met, we asked who was able to commit to this project for this quarter. It sounds like, based on what Red Hat said, or what Brad said, that the folks at Red Hat may not be able to commit as much to this project this quarter. Brad mentioned that Wamin and Jan may only be able to commit a couple hours a week, possibly for code reviews. Luis was on board 100%, same as last quarter. I've been able to pull in David for my team to help. Vlad has committed the same as last quarter, 100%, which in reality for Vlad is 150%. Chakri is also not able to commit as much as last quarter. He says he can commit a day a week possibly for small tasks. I think he would be good for code reviews as well. We put out a call on the SIG storage meeting for more volunteers, and luckily a few folks stepped up. So from SAP, we have Felipe and Pietro. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Mute.
Are you guys on mute?
I just saw Felipe on
Hello?
mute.
Oh, okay, I was muted. Okay.
There you are.
Hello, guys. Felipe here. So basically, Pietro is on vacation, so he'll join us next week. I guess we have meetings 3 times a week, right? If I'm not mistaken. Short
That's
meetings. Right. Yeah. Okay, so I've been at SAP for about a year. I worked on developing volume plugins for Kubernetes so far. I've worked with flags. We've been already in contact some time ago, Saad. And now we would like to migrate our current solution to CSI. So we are here to accelerate its development to make it GA as soon as possible.
Sweet. Glad to hear. Glad to have you on board.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is Sergey from Cisco.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. All right. So my name is Sergey, and I've been working on different projects in the Kubernetes environment. Mostly, well, I mean, a bit of with the storage. So I've done some work for KubeIDM. I don't have a specific requirement for, like, from Cisco in terms of the storage plugin. It's more like my interest. And so I was hoping to be able to do some work on CSI, preferably for the entry parts, because since I mean, we're not offering any vendor specific, at least at this point, storage, so I'd be more interested in working in doing some stuff for CSI for entry parts.
Okay. And finally, we have Yunquan from, is it KO Cloud? K-Cloud? Looks like he was not able to join the meeting today, so we'll see if he is able to join the next meeting. All right, so let's move on. Next order of business is figuring out what are the things that we're going to be working on this quarter, do assignments, and then decide whether that work is sufficient to get us to beta this quarter or not. I think last meeting we were looking like we probably wouldn't be able to get to beta because the list of things that we need to do is so long. But considering the number of people that we have, actually, before we continue, I wanted to let David introduce himself as well. David, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, hi, I'm David. I've been with the Kubernetes storage SIG
for about 6 months now. I'm excited to start working on CSI as well.
Yeah, David's a rock star, so we're very happy to have him on the team. And
Welcome. Awesome.
all right, so these are the items that we have. The way that we've broken this down, for the new folks, before I begin, some homework for you. Please go read up on the container interface Kubernetes design. Container storage interface. It will be in the community repo. So go and read this design. I'll post it into the agenda doc, and this will give you a good background of where things are. Let's put this in here. Homework for new members. Read design doc. If somebody wants to go in and clean up those links, feel free. Second thing is look at Kubernetes-CSI. This is the repository that we're putting all of our external Kubernetes CSI components. Can't spell. And then, of course, look at the spec itself. The spec is independent of Kubernetes. It's hosted in the Kubernetes storage interface repo.
Aside, just one thing, the documentation that we have has all those links in it.
Good point. Can you please add a link to that?
Yeah, actually, it's in the agenda. I want to discuss it because I did an update to it.
Cool. In fact, we can probably jump to that, and then we can move on to planning, get rid of these items. What do you think? Are you okay with that, Luis?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. I was talking. So, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, go for it.
So the first one is that it's still pending review.
Mm-hmm. Jan, can you take a look at this as well?
Okay.
I think you also have approval permissions on the E2E repo.
Yeah, and any new people can look at it too because it kind of shows how it works, how CSI drivers work. So, all right, second.
Place to start. Go ahead.
Yeah, second is that I changed completely the documentation. You can go to that one now, and it's based on MD Docs, which is from Rust. So if you're a Rust language developer, this looks familiar to you. So the cool thing is that now everything's checked in. It still uses Markdown as the format, but now MD Doc pulls everything together into this really nice thing here. So
what is that called? MT Doc?
MD like Markdown.
Oh, MD. Oh, Markdown. Okay.
Sorry, MD Book. That's what
MD
it's called.
Book. Okay.
And then the next link under that one shows, it shows the changes. Go down a little bit. In the doc, yeah, right there. So it says the docs directory is the output where GitHub grabs the stuff, and the book directory is the code, the sources. The really nice thing is that people were asking me through Slack to change things, and I had to do it by hand. But with this model, they just send a PR and then.
Nice.
So yeah, that's docs directory is the output of MD book.
Okay.
This is awesome, Luis.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so if you want to make changes to the content, you would do it inside the book directory?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you could add chapters. You could add. You can reorganize how the book looks, and it's really nice. Super simple too.
Yeah. So. And this is hosted on our Kubernetes GitHub. Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. The only thing is I couldn't figure out is how you need the /docs. I couldn't figure out how to just say kubernetes.github.io and that's it.
Got it.
In the top one, the first one. But that's just nothing.
Oops. So read the docs.
And yeah, the docs has all the links to everything you type above that.
Cool. All right.
That's all I have.
Let's move on. Unless you have anything else, Luis?
No, that's all I have right now.
Okay, cool. One item I had for you, Luis, was to connect you with Julian, who is one of the members of the CSI spec team. He has been working on a certification suite with Cloud Foundry, and they're interested in donating that to CSI. I mentioned at that meeting that you were working from the Kubernetes side of things on a certification suite, and that we were interested in donating that. And it turns out, I think the code team also has something along the lines of a certification suite. So what we're asking Julian to do is take the lead on trying to take a look at these different projects and maybe combine them and have some version of that checked into CSI. I'd like you to kind of be the sanity checker from our side, who can make sure that what the Cloud Foundry folks are proposing makes sense and isn't completely insane. Would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely. The
Okay.
question I have for you is, what meeting was that in?
So there are two sets of meetings for CSI. One is the public community meeting, and the second is the approvers meeting. This happened in the approvers meeting, which at the moment is private, but is going to start being published on YouTube for transparency. That's a work in progress.
Okay.
So feel free to just send me an email, and I'll reply to you and put you in touch with Julian.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, cool. Next, a small item is added by Jan, meeting time and frequency. So currently last quarter we did 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It seemed to work well for us. We moved at a fairly quick pace and got a lot of work done. I'd like to keep a similar pace unless folks think it's too frequent. Thoughts?
Well, it's too frequent to me because I'm in Europe and it's 7 p.m. here. It's Friday, 7 p.m. So
that's fair.
I probably won't join Friday meetings, and I may occasionally skip the other ones.
Okay, that's fair. So just attend as often as you can. I think it's useful to just do a quick sync if you can't attend. I think like on Monday it was basically me and Luis. Which is completely okay. If you have other obligations, that's okay. And Jan, just attend as often as you can, or whatever is good for you.
Okay. It would help me if we could meet 1 hour earlier.
That works for me, I think. Let me check my calendar real quick. Does it work for other people?
I'm in the East Coast, so that works for me.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, I think that would be okay for me.
So 9 a.m. tends to have conflicts for me, which is why I put it at 10. But I can possibly, I'll just skip the days that I have conflicts. I think I can make that work. 9 a.m. Oh, there's a lot of conflicts on 9 a.m. So for example, on Wednesdays, it's the Container Storage Interface Community Meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I have another conflict, and Friday I have another one.
Leave it at 10 then.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, just attend as often as you can, and if it's once a week, I think that should be sufficient. And it sounds like we're mostly going to require you for reviews, so I think that'll be okay.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get to the meaty item for today, which is work assignment. If there is a item that we review that you really want to work on, just call it out. That'll make assignment easy. And if not, we'll see what makes sense. So the way that we've broken this down is items that are required for your Kubernetes beta, At the top is the items that, the changes that need to go into the Kubernetes core code repository. That means where we have to be aligned with the release cycle for Kubernetes for these changes. The second set of changes are external items. These are in the Kubernetes-CSI repository. The third set of changes are changes to the CSI spec itself. These are pretty hairy because first the changes need to be made in the CSI spec. Then we need to make the associated changes both in the external and in the possibly in the internal Kubernetes code. And then the last set of things are bugs that need to be fixed. This is probably going to be a list that'll continue to expand.
Question about the CSI specs.
Yes.
Now that it's tagged, are we gonna? Do you foresee us continuing to tag 0. Whatever it was, 0.10?
Right. So 0.1 was tagged in December. We should probably go ahead and snap to that version right now.
Okay.
Anybody who wants to make that change, just go ahead and make that change in your repository that you're responsible for. And then I believe, based on my discussions with the CSI team, they want to do quarterly releases. So we can probably expect 0.2 or 0.3, 0.2 by the end of this quarter, and then 0.3 end of the next quarter, and so on.
Okay.
Until we're ready for 1.0, at which point we'll move over to 1.0 and then 1.1 and so on.
All right.
That's a good item to add, which is update your spec dependency to point to 0.1 tag. Update spec dependency.
This is could be a CSI question, but as a driver writer, we need to return back the version also in one of the calls. So, and also every version comes in every API call. Does that mean that right now, should we say if you're not the version that I'm using, just I can't work with you at all, or should we say just forget it? No.
That's a good question.
Should we start testing? Should we start testing for version?
Absolutely.
Well, so it's up to the PO to figure out what the PO supports, right? So that call is initiated by the PO to figure out what versions are supported by the driver.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we should start doing that now.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
I mean, it's not strict, but there is a check right now.
Yeah. Well, right now it's a very strict check in Kubernetes. If it isn't advertising a specific version, it'll say, no, I'm not going to talk to you, right?
Right. And
that version, I think, is 0.1.
Yeah, it is. Right now, it's 0.1. Okay. It's like exact match.
Yeah. So
like you said.
If your driver does not advertise exactly 0.1, then it won't talk to it.
That sounds strange to me because it could be like 0.1.1 for.
Yeah, it's part of the bug list as things or to do that Saad had pointed out that we need to be a little bit more lenient.
Yeah. So I added that to the bug list. I realized we forgot to add it here. So we need to make the Kubernetes code more lenient in what it will accept as a CSI version for a driver.
Yeah.
And then we need to add more tests around version skew and things like that.
Yeah.
And it also has supported versions. So I think the one question that will come up is you have major and minor. As long as the major matches, do you want to consider the minor is going to match? Right now, the way the drivers at least work is anything less than the major and minor we support, we say that, okay, it's supported.
Okay. And I think that's a good approach for the PO too, is to just consider the major.
But we need to have it documented clearly somewhere.
Right.
So stick to that behavior.
Yeah.
I will
Okay.
do the same. That's a good approach.
Yeah, this could become interesting. So that'll be a big item. We can start there. Who wants to do version handling?
I can do that since I'm doing that on my side and for CSI driver anyway.
It's all yours. Congratulations. All right, first item assigned. Let's go back to the top and start from there. So if CSI implements mount device call, Kubernetes should call it. So in Kubernetes, we have 4 sets of calls. One is create volume, second is attach volume, third is mount device, and fourth is mount. Mount device is tied very closely to attach, meaning if a volume plugin implements attach, it must implement mount device. And mount device is required for making the iSCSI device available at a specific global mount point. And then finally, the mount call will take that global mount point and bind mount it to the actual pod. So for a single volume that is scheduled to a single node, it will mount device is only called once when the first pod referencing that volume is scheduled to that node. For any subsequent pod referencing the same volume, mount device is not called, but mount is called. CSI does not have the equivalent of a mount device call, and what this means is that it makes it more complicated for a CSI driver writer, CSI driver author to be able to write a driver for a attachable volume, because what they need to do is do reference counting of some sort to figure out when to create the global mount, meaning when to mount the device, and when only to do the bind mounts, and when the last bind mount has been unmounted so that they can also clean up the global mount point. It's not the end of the world in terms of like it's something that the driver writers can work around. But it's something that we should try and get into the CSI spec because it'll make writing new drivers easier. I was thinking of having David work on this because he's been he's becoming familiar with the Kubernetes code path. And any thoughts on that, or does anybody have a real desire to work on this?
I just had a comment.
Sure.
The sidecar that we have, because I remember early on during the discussion for the implementation, we talk about a sidecar that has common code to solve these, to expose these type of functionality. Is that the way you're foreseeing going with this?
What do you mean?
Basically, something that has the maybe a collection of API calls via code itself to provide these type of functionalities so that they're implemented once, and driver writers can rely on that.
Oh, you're thinking like a common set of operations that different driver authors can.
Right, because Kubernetes already does that right today.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So,
Kubernetes does it. If we can get it into the spec, then as far as the driver author is concerned, this is one less thing that they have to implement in their.
Right. I see. Okay, so you're going that route. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would prefer. That because honestly, it applies to a lot of volume plugins, and if we already have the code to do it in Kubernetes.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to make the volume authors do it again. So if we reduce the burden there, that would be super awesome. If we aren't able to do it for whatever reason, it's not the end of the world, which actually is why I just reduced the priority on this to P2.
Okay.
So any comments, concerns, or anybody want to work on this more than David? All right, cool. Let's
Go
move
for it.
on to the next item. So actually, this item was going to require working in the CSI spec,
Okay.
getting the change in there, and then making the associated changes in the Kubernetes side of things.
Sounds good.
Next up is moving mount propagation to beta. This is something that Jan led to alpha, and it took a very long time. I don't foresee the move from alpha to beta being nearly as difficult or as politically challenging. I don't know if Jan can commit to it. I asked Brad, I believe, in the storage SIG, and he said he would check with Jan. Jan, do you know if you can commit anytime to this? Or?
Well, technically, turning into beta is just one line change.
Yeah.
Just enable it by default. What is missing are more tests. And as we all here implement some driver of some kind, that we all use mount propagation. So I would appreciate if you report any issues you have with mount propagation as it is in Kubernetes right now, because you must run it actually to test your stuff. If you run it in production, if you stress test it, if you load test it, and just try to break it. And if I am convinced enough that nobody was able to break it, then it can go to beta. Just one line changed.
Cool. Sounds reasonable to me.
I will definitely be testing it, so I'll let you know what happens.
Do we need automated tests for this feature or not?
There is an end-to-end test in upstream in Kubernetes that runs with every commit, I think. I haven't found any bugs with that so far, so everything works, which is kind of scary because mount propagation is pretty difficult and it can break things pretty easily. So I'm kind of nervous that nobody found any bug, any issues.
I think the feature itself is just setting up our shared, right? It's just exposing the latent feature. And so the feature itself can't be blamed for what it does, what people do with it.
Yeah, sure, but there are many distros around and many different setups around. So
that's fair. Okay, so if you have any issues with mount propagation, report them back to Jan. If near code freeze, Jan is convinced that there are no issues, we'll flip the switch and move this to beta. Otherwise, we keep it in alpha for this quarter. Cool. Sounds good to me. Next item is adding. Yes.
I can take up that. Always need privileged container. Let me try to take a stab at it.
Perfect. Okay. And I think this is a duplicate of.
That's. What's wrong with privileged container?
Right here. So I think this is the item saying that Kubernetes by default is not privileged, right?
Yep.
So.
Okay, but you still need sysadmin capabilities to do that, to do mount.
Yep. The goal is we can see that whether we can use any pod security policies and get around it rather than get.
Well, it is in PCP already. If you enable
no, there is a
per cluster, and then you need to enable it per PSP. I think.
There is a blanket allow privilege which we need to pass it to the kubelet. So all the work items.
No. Kubelet also consults the PSP, I think. Not everybody can run privileged.
No, but some distros, they don't want to actually allow the allow privileged.
I know, but
option.
But still, you need to allow it somehow. You need to allow sysadmin capability then, which is kind of the same.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see, like if I can make it work by not doing the allow privileged. I think that'll be perfect. If we cannot, we cannot. So.
Okay. Just to clarify, the only work here is to try to get Kubernetes to change the default for allow privileged.
that's one thing. And the second one will be like, if we say hello privileged is not recommended, right? Then I need to make sure whether we can give any capabilities and make sure it works with them.
Okay.
Yeah, because for giving a cap admin, we don't need to have the hello privileged. Sure.
That's right.
When you say Kubernetes, and I know I brought this up before, but I think you mean kube admin, kube ADM.
Yeah, there are different distros, right? And most of them try to say that we don't want to run root privileges.
Yeah.
At least best practice. Even one of the CAS benchmarks says it. So yeah.
Okay, that seems reasonable to me. Next up is block device support in CSI. Block device support was added to the Kubernetes core volume code. Block devices are also supported in the CSI spec. And the work here would be making the intermediate layer, our Kubernetes in-tree volume plugin, as well as the external Kubernetes CSI components, modify them to handle block devices. Anybody keen on working on this?
Yeah, you could put me down.
I would suggest giving this to the team that's doing this already. Aaron and the guy from.
That would be nice, but I'm not sure how much bandwidth that they have, considering they're going to be doing this for all the other in-tree volume plugins.
Yeah, that's the thing, that they're not from the CSI point of view, but from the Kubernetes side point of view, there needs to be an alignment.
There needs to be an alignment, and what I would like that alignment to be is them reviewing this, right?
Okay.
Somebody from our team can do the work and then have them review it and make sure it makes sense.
Okay.
So it sounds like I heard Vlad speak up.
Yep. Go ahead and put me down.
Okay, cool. Make volume attributions first class. I think this would be a pretty easy item for somebody who is new. Essentially what happened was there was a set of fields that we had in the API, the Kubernetes API for the CSI volume object that we didn't add into the API, and we realized it too late, and so we started using annotations to hold that information, and what we want to do is add that information in as a first class field in the object. Who is interested in working on that?
I could work on that.
Great, that would be perfect. And that was?
Felipe.
Felipe. Okay. Next up is node authorizer limit volume attachment access from kubelet. This is a requirement from the security team. Today, when the kubelet component of Kubernetes issues a request against the API server for things like the persistent volume objects, there's a component in front of the API server called the authorizer, which says, okay, I see that this request is coming from kubelet, and I'm going to check if there is a pod scheduled to that kubelet that is referencing that volume. If it is not, I'm not going to allow this kubelet to access that persistent volume. So it's a way to limit access in case a particular node is compromised. And the ask for them is to go ahead and extend that authorizer to this new volume attachment object that we introduced. Fairly isolated project, probably interesting if you want to jump into some of the API security components. Who's interested in this?
I'll do it.
Vlad?
Yeah.
Awesome. I also don't want to overload you because you are a workhorse, and it would be good to throw you at emergencies. But that's fine. We can rebalance after.
I'm trying to stay in the the internal stuff that I still have working memory of. So
okay, that seems reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Deploying external components to GCR.io. I am going to have David work on this because you need to actually have access to GCR.io. Next up is topology changes. I have been doing work on this last quarter, so I have some thoughts on it. I'd like to work on it if everybody's okay with that. All right. Next up is driving CSI credential changes. This is something that requires us to work in the CSI spec to drive the changes first and then push them into the Kubernetes side of things. The problem is that so there's two sets of credentials that you need to worry about. One is the set of credentials that a volume plugin needs to talk to its backend. So you can imagine a GCE volume plugin that needs the API credentials to talk to the GCE API. Those credentials can actually be injected directly into the container for the CSI driver through whatever mechanism you have. In Kubernetes, it's Kubernetes secrets. So that's not a problem. The problem is that potentially for each one of the calls that CSI exposes, create volume, attach volume, mount volume, we could have additional credentials that are required for each one of those calls. And we need to handle that in a sane way. I am thinking about working on this because I have a lot of context on it, but if there's anybody else who is really interested in this, I am willing to work with them and let them take the lead and guide them instead.
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, all you.
Take it. Next item is registration of socket with kubelet device plugin mechanism. So the work here is when we have a component of the CSI driver running on the node machine, the way that kubelet will interact with that is a Unix domain socket. The Unix domain socket is essentially hard-coded. It is like Kubernetes /plugin /driver name /csi.sock or something like that. What we want to do is have some mechanism by which an arbitrary plugin can register with Kubernetes, with kubelet, to say that I am a new volume plugin and this is the socket that I will be at. So the folks that are working on GPUs and device plugins came up with a proposal for this, and we weren't sure whether that is the way forward or not. So what this would require is working with those folks to finalize on a design and then adopt that design. It is entirely on the Kubernetes side of things. But what it does is establishes the mechanism which will be used to register plugins with kubelet, have CSI adopted, and then the GPU and device plugin folks will also pick that up.
Oh, so are the GPU and device folks, do they have any kind of implementation done?
I believe they have some implementation done. We need to decide if the direction that they've chosen is sufficient. If it is, then we need to, whatever changes need to be made, we need to make them for CSI and yeah.
So it needs to be generic enough to work for both use cases.
And this requires design work. So if whoever picks it up needs to be comfortable with actually designing things.
You can put me down provisionally. I'll see. Maybe I'll give up something that I've selected earlier.
Okay. That seems reasonable to me.
You put me also on it. I could conditionally maybe on it. I don't know if I have too much other stuff coming up. So maybe Vlad and I can, substitute each other.
I mean,
I would like one person to take the lead on just driving the design. But we can sort that out later.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's do that because I'm interested in internals.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm interested in the driver's side point of view.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so next up is understanding the design to handle ephemeral volumes. This is an ask by our security team. They want to be able to, for example, inject arbitrary tokens into pods at runtime. Think of it similar to the way that the secret volume works today in Tree. We want to make sure that CSI is flexible enough to allow those kinds of use cases. It's more or less experimenting and researching and maybe testing things out and seeing if there is any big blocking issues. It's an interesting item for anybody who's interested in security and injecting ephemeral information into a pod. If we don't have an assignee for this, I can possibly go to the security folks and ask for a volunteer from their side.
Yeah, I think that we won't have time for that.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. And if no one volunteers, then we can circle back.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Okay, I'll circle back with the security team. Next up is specifying file systems. This should be fairly straightforward. Today, the file system is hard-coded to ext4. We're going to need to modify the API for the CSI volume source to allow setting the file system and then pass that through. The only thing we need to be careful about is we need to align with whatever we do for block because file system doesn't apply for block, so we don't want to put it in a place where if somebody consumes it as block, they're also required to specify the file system. So I would suggest whoever is working on block work on this as well, which preliminarily is Vlad.
All right. Yeah, I remember that very well, so that probably makes sense.
Okay, so and then we can rebalance. It looks like we're having Vlad do everything.
Yeah, we definitely we'll rebalance.
We'll rebalance it.
I mean, some of the stuff they definitely gonna, some of them gonna require more efforts than others. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
Makes sense. Next up is more end-to-end tests for drivers. This would be external to, actually, Luis, can you clarify whether this is external to Kubernetes or not?
I think this is the work that we do today, right? This CSI Sanity at Chakri.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because end-to-end completely, that's complicated.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move that down to external items for Q1 then.
It's part of that one. It's part of the P0 there.
And we'll revisit that.
Yeah.
Okay, next up here is bypass attach for CSI drivers that don't support attach. This might be a good item for someone who's interested in just analyzing the overall design of CSI in Kubernetes today, end-to-end. If you do, you're going to quickly realize that we always call attach no matter whether the CSI driver supports it or not. Today, the way we work around that is that the external attacher component, which we provide, basically checks if the CSI driver supports attach, which is controller node publish. If it doesn't, then it just acts as a no-op and completes the attach operation. Ideally, what we should do is completely bypass the attach step altogether, but what that requires is having the CSI driver register with the master control plane. That seems very challenging to do given the design that we have. I'm also willing to punt this to post-beta, pre-GA, if we don't have any volunteers.
I think because we do have a workaround right now, which is the no-op, probably should punt it.
Okay.
And also
sorry, go ahead.
And also the request a change to the CSI spec, right? And we didn't include that in version 01. So
sorry, say that
about that requires a change to the CSI spec, right?
It requires a change to the maybe not. It depends on what the solution is.
Yeah, remember we talked about having it exposed as different services and capabilities.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's better we punt it out of for now. So
yeah. Okay, that seems reasonable. We'll move this to beta. I will cross it out of this. So apologies for having this meeting run so long. Planning meetings I should have scheduled more time. See if we can change Kubernetes allow privilege. So Chakri is already working on this. So that completes the things that we need for Kubernetes entry. I also added a section here for external dependencies, just things that we need to keep track of. It sounds like block device support has to go to beta before we can, and mount propagation needs to go to beta before we can. External items for Q1, these are the items that are in the Kubernetes-CSI repo. P0 we have here is unit testing framework for CSI drivers to ensure that a CSI driver's unique behavior works as intended. It sounds like Luis is going to be taking the lead on this with the certification stuff.
Yep.
Okay. And then end-to-end tests for drivers. Luis, do you also want to?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah.
Cool. Next up is.
That's me too.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, this is coming up with a automated build system for the sidecar containers that we have in the external repo today.
Yep.
That'll be very valuable. CSI drivers should not depend on Kubernetes.
That's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Is that really necessary?
Why would that be hard?
Strictly necessary because it'll continue to work with or without. But it is a very nice to have.
The only contingency over there is today we have a lot of code which is very well tested in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And we need to split that out into the external component. There is I think, utils package which has been split out, but never got populated. So there's a bug pending over there. We can make it P2. That's not a big deal. But
should we assign it or leave it unassigned for now?
Keep it over there. I will ping Tim because I think Tim was the one who pulled out that utils, and then assign it to me for now.
Okay. Sounds good. Next up is add strict validation code in CSI common for CSI drivers. This is compliance. I'm going to bundle this all under the same item number 1, which is assigned to Luis. Next up is allow volumes to not implement the controller if necessary. I think this is tied to the attach component, but slightly different in that this is isolated to the, actually this requires a change on the spec. You know what, let's just mark this out of scope for GA.
Yeah, does it sound like this is more a spec thing?
Yeah, it is also a spec thing. Move it down here. Okay, next up is automated build system for drivers. Can we bundle that under the other automated builds?
That depends, yes, but if we want automated also to go into and push a Docker container, we need the access values for that, just so you know.
Okay.
To push the Docker container up on builds.
Yeah. But so it makes sense to track them as independent items then.
We can do it together. I don't mind. I just letting you know that since you said you had the gcr.io taking care of that, then I'll just work with you to see what we can do about pushing it. If not, we'll just keep the Docker one.
Yeah, I mean, for now, let's assume it's the Docker one, and then if there's any work we need to do for the GCR one, I'll loop you guys in.
Yep.
Okay. Last item here is docs to write for the new drivers.
Louis, you're good with dogs, but if you're not signing up, I will take that.
Yeah. Do you know the way I did it right now, because all drivers are so different, is that I try to make it so I just give enough of a foundation, and I already did that in the documentation that we have today. So let's check what we have today, and then we'll add on to it. So you can put me on that, and Shakri too.
Sounds good. For the external CSI spec changes, the credentials one, I'll drive. Topology, I'll drive. Mount devices will be David. Snapshots, I think we can cut from this milestone. It's it's too premature to work on that. Resize is premature. We'll punt that to GA. Allow volume drivers to not implement the controller if necessary is a P2. Let's leave it unassigned for now. And then we can pick it up later in the quarter if somebody has bandwidth. And for bugs, actually, before we continue, I want to make sure everybody, so I have work, David has work, Luis has a lot of stuff. Vlad has a ton of stuff. Chakri has some stuff. Felipe has an item. So it sounds like Sergey and possibly Ren need work. So this might be a good place to jump in. Bugs that we have right now, actually passing FS group to CSI driver, we captured as a feature that we're working on. So we can probably remove it from here. Let's do that. And that was captured up here. File system, topology.
A little bit down. Yep.
Right there. Okay, and then we can remove it from here. Passing in supplemental group, I'm okay pushing that to GA as well. And that's more of a feature than a bug as well. Update spec dependency to point to 0.1. External components registrar should probe prior to storage operations. Yeah, go ahead.
I have one question. Supplemental group and FS group today are not passed to mount in Kubernetes, right? They're already handled by the driver. Are we planning to change that?
Are they? I thought there was some mechanism by which Kubernetes allows you to specify supplemental groups in policy.
Yeah.
And that gets programmed by the drivers today. It never makes it to drivers in the common code. It never makes it to the mount call.
No, I remember, or at least FS group. That's something that's handled by the driver itself.
Today,
so what
today Flex doesn't pass this out today.
How does how does Flex handle it? Does it? Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying like the common Kubernetes code handles it.
Exactly. Yes, the entry code handles it. It's not passed out. If we need it, we can do it. But
okay, could you? Would it be okay to assign you this item to just double check?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think one thing I noticed was that we need FS group needs to be passed so that the driver is aware of it.
So the same thing with the FS group also. Today we do that, but okay.
Yeah, we just got to figure out how we're going to do it with the external drivers.
Yep. So today the way it does is you do the mount, and after that you assign the FS group to it in the common code.
Right.
So if that is behavior is not good enough, then we can revisit it. But if that is enough, then we don't need to do anything. Okay. I'll sync with you Ballard offline, so that's fine.
Well, I see. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, next up is external components like registrar, attacher, and provisioner should probe prior to storage operations. There's a couple of bugs opened up for this. This seems like a fairly easy item to pick up. Sergey, do you have any interest in picking this up?
I don't think he's still on.
Okay. So let's leave this unassigned. We can revisit it on Monday. It's non-critical.
Saad, you can assign it to me. Pietro hasn't worked either, so maybe you can assign Pietro there.
Okay.
Or me.
I will assign you, and then feel free to reassign as needed.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And I think I opened these, so if you guys have any questions, just reach back.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
All right, next up is updating spec dependency to point to 0.1 tag. This requires updating internal Kubernetes, external attacher, external provisioner, and driver registrar. It's busy work.
Sure is.
Anybody interested in signing up?
You can put me on it.
Okay, thank you, Luis.
I'm gonna try to see if I can get somebody from Portworx just to start doing these and get part of the team.
That'd be great. And then we've already signed up Luis for version handling. Okay, so that completes assignment of tasks. We are way over time. Go ahead and take a look at the items that are assigned to you, see if they make sense. And then what we'll do on Monday is we'll rebalance it. It looks like we didn't end up assigning any items to Sergey, which is kind of nice because we assigned too many items to Vlad. So we can rebalance on Monday. And we'll see if we can pick up Yuquan on Monday.
Just one thing, I added 2 items to the end of the agenda.
Oh, okay. Yeah, feel free. Go ahead.
So, really quick things. One was that Shay from IBM had asked me to keep track of a path for us to determine how flex volume developers can have an existing cluster be migrated from flex volumes to CSI drivers. So it's something that we should document and say, this is how we should do it for them, and write any code that needs to be done. So it's something we need to keep track of. Second is doing this work, I've noticed that I could write a driver to completely hack and go into a system, a Kubernetes system, and go and access the CSI socket from anything, and I just start creating 1 billion volumes, right?
Yep.
So right now we're completely open to getting hacked, and that for me as a production system is very scary. So we need some type of method to protect this, and I think this is huge right now, and we need to solve this ASAP. Because
so I think the credential stuff that we have coming up is important for this. I think if there's a system that cares about this, they need to have basically operation level authentication authorization. And
but there's a different credentials from volumes to access of the CSI socket.
Yeah, but from a OS level, if that socket file is properly guarded, that's the first line of defense that we can rely on.
Hey, typically the way I was envisioning it is you cannot create any of the domain sockets until you have permissions or you're a privileged guy. The domain side has to create it. So, and if you give access to privileged container by the admin, then you're screwed anyways. So I think that production, we have it today. So this has to be privileged to be able to write into the kubelet plugins directly.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, that's the OS level protection is a good first line of defense. Not to minimize what you brought up, Lois, it is a good point, because if somebody compromises that socket file, you can you can go crazy. But yeah.
So maybe
I might have to jump off, guys.
No, that's fine. All I want is maybe a document that says how at least you can protect it a little bit.
That would be
that's a good point.
It's a very good point. I agree.
Okay, so we'll wrap it up for today, and then we'll reconvene on Monday. We can rebalance things. Feel free to look at what's assigned to you and get started.
Awesome.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Monday. So for Monday, right, actually I will add the GCEPD, which we haven't covered over here, the driver spot.
Yes.
AWS, but we can take it over on Monday and we can assign, maybe we have a lot more folks, right? We are looking for work, maybe we can give them.
Yeah, go ahead and add that to this list so we don't forget, and then we'll pick it up on Monday for assigning. Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, take care, guys. Have a good weekend.
All right.
3 things.